This is the Story Archive. Story 1, Ice Rink. Some relationships end loudly. Arguments, betrayal, explosions, and some end because someone tried to ice skate. This is one of those stories. Back in college, there was a girl he had been talking to, not officially dating, but close. Close enough that it mattered. They texted often. There was that early-stage excitement where every notification feels important. One weekend, she invited him to go ice skating with her and a few friends. Simple enough. There was just one problem. He had never ice skated before. Not once. But instead of admitting that, he said yes, confidently. And that's usually where these stories begin to tilt. Because when you really like someone, you don't make decisions based on logic. You make them based on pride. They arrived at the rink. Cold air, music echoing, people gliding across the ice effortlessly, couples skating hand in hand, friends laughing in the center. It looked easy, until he stepped onto the ice. The moment his skate touched the surface, his body realized something his ego didn't. This was a mistake. His ankles wobbled. His legs stiffened. He grabbed the wall instantly. She skated ahead a few feet, then turned and smiled at him. He smiled back, still holding the wall. One lap, he thought. Just one lap along the edge. Then I'll get it. One lap became 2, then 3. Everyone else was moving freely. He was surviving. And at some point, you can feel when people notice. Not in a cruel way. Just that subtle shift. That awareness. Eventually, pride took over. He told himself, just let go once. Just show confidence. So he waited for a clear moment, took a breath, and pushed away from the wall. 2 seconds. It worked. He was moving forward, slowly, but moving. And then, his balance shifted. His foot slid outward. His arms reacted too late. And there's this half second before you fall, where your brain knows it's over. And then, he hit the ice. Hard. Not graceful, not subtle. A full fall, right in front of multiple people. And as he looked up, flash. A camera. Someone had captured it. The exact moment his attempt at confidence collapsed. She helped him up, smiled politely, but something felt different. The energy shifted, not dramatically, just quietly. The rest of the night felt shorter, less connected. Eventually, she drove him home, and during that car ride, small talk replaced chemistry. Silences lasted longer. And sometimes relationships don't explode. They just fade. By the time he stepped out of the car, whatever potential had been there was gone. For a while, he replayed it in his head. If he hadn't fallen, would it have worked? Or was it already slipping before he stepped on the ice? Years later, he was in a different relationship. Serious, stable. Eventually, they got married. One day, they were talking about random college memories. Ice skating came up. He told her the story. Halfway through, she stopped him. Wait, what rink was this? Same one. Same night. She had been there too. They just hadn't known each other yet. And after hearing the full story, she laughed. Oh, I remember you. You were the guy hugging the wall. And then she added something unexpected. The girl you were with, she didn't seem that interested anyway. And maybe that's the part that matters. Maybe the fall didn't end anything. Maybe it just revealed it. Sometimes embarrassment isn't a disaster. It's a redirect. What do you think? Did the fall ruin it? Or was it already over before he hit the ice?
Story 2. The Wave. Be Me. 19 years old, college freshman, spring break, first real trip without parents, first time feeling independent, first time feeling like I had something to prove. We were at the beach, sun high overhead, music drifting somewhere down the shoreline, groups of students scattered across the sand, pretending they weren't self-conscious. And there he was, tall, easy smile, the kind of confidence that isn't loud, just steady. We had talked the night before at a bonfire, nothing dramatic, just easy conversation, the kind where you walk away thinking, I hope I see him again tomorrow. Well, tomorrow arrived, and I saw him, standing near the water with his friends. At 19, calm isn't something you've mastered yet. So instead of walking over and saying hello, I decided to do something memorable, or at least what I thought would be memorable. I ran toward the shoreline, laughing, carefree, like I belonged in a movie. The sand grew softer under my feet. My heart beat faster, part nerves, part adrenaline. I was aware he was watching, which made me commit even harder to the performance. The first wave hit my knees, cold but manageable. I turned slightly, half glanced back toward shore. Still smooth, still composed. Then the second wave came. It wasn't massive, not dangerous, just enough. Enough to knock me slightly off balance. Enough to surprise me. Enough to pull at the loose tie of my swimsuit top. In a way I absolutely had not planned for. There's a strange half-second when something unexpected happens in public. Your brain hasn't caught up yet. You're still smiling, still pretending everything is fine, until you feel it. The shift, the unmistakable realization. Something is wrong. The wave receded, and so did my confidence. My swimsuit top had come undone, not completely lost. But enough. Enough that I instantly crossed my arms and turned away from the shore. The confidence I tried to project dissolved. In its place was something very human, very 19, very panicked. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stood there, waist deep in the water, trying to fix the situation without making it worse. And then I heard splashing, someone walking toward me. It was him. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look amused. He didn't look like he was calling his friends over. He just stepped into the water, calmly, like this was the most ordinary thing in the world, and quietly said, "Rough wave?" I nodded, mortified, without staring, without reacting dramatically. He turned slightly away, giving me space. "Take your time," he said, casual, steady, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. I fixed the situation as discreetly as possible, tied the knot tighter this time, took a breath. When I turned back around, he was still there, waiting, not staring, just there. We walked back toward shore together. I expected teasing, or at least an awkward joke, but he didn't mention it. Instead, he asked about my major, where I was from, what I wanted to do after college. The conversation felt normal, grounded, steady, and that's when something shifted. The wave wasn't the important part. His reaction was. At 19, embarrassment feels permanent, like one moment defines you. But sometimes the person who matters most isn't the one who watches you shine. It's the one who stays calm when things unravel. We spent the rest of spring break together. Nothing dramatic. Beach walks, late-night food runs, talking about nothing and everything. When break ended, we went back to separate campuses, different states, different schedules. But we stayed in touch. Long-distance calls became weekend visits. Weekend visits became shared plans. Years later, at another beach, a quieter one this time, cider, he proposed. And yes, I wore a swimsuit, one that tied very securely. Looking back, it's strange what you remember. Not the parties, not the bonfire, not even the proposal as clearly as that wave. Because that wave could have ended something before it began. One awkward moment, one poorly tied knot, one surge of panic. Instead, It became a story we still laugh about. Not because it was perfect, but because it wasn't. Sometimes the moments that feel catastrophic are just filters. They reveal who stays and who doesn't. If I hadn't tried to impress him, maybe we would have talked anyway. If the wave hadn't hit, maybe I would have felt confident for the wrong reasons, but it did, and he stayed. And that's the part that mattered. This was one of those moments. Small, unexpected, but quietly defining.
Story 1. Accidental screenshot text. There's a specific kind of panic that only happens when you realize you've sent a message to the wrong person. This was one of those moments. He had been dating her for about 3 months. Not brand new, not fully serious. Somewhere in that uncertain middle space. They saw each other on weekends, texted throughout the week, met each other's friends. It felt good, comfortable, easy, but it also felt undefined, and that bothered him more than he admitted. That night, he was lying in bed, texting his best friend. The kind of friend who gets the unfiltered version, the honest version, the version you wouldn't say out loud. His friend had asked, "So what's the deal with her? Is this serious?" He hesitated before replying, because he didn't know. He liked her. He enjoyed being around her, but long-term, he wasn't sure. So he typed it. "I really like her, but I'm not sure this is serious long-term." He stared at the message for a second, then sent it. His friend responded with something supportive, normal conversation. And for a moment, everything was fine, until he decided to screenshot it. He didn't know why. Maybe to show another friend, maybe just to reread it. Maybe because doubt feels more real when you see it captured. He took the screenshot, opened his messages, selected her name, and hit send. There's a half second where your brain doesn't register what you've done. You're still moving, still breathing, still casual. Then you see it. The message preview, the screenshot, under her name. Sent. His stomach dropped. He opened the chat instantly, hoping, praying. Maybe it didn't go through, maybe it failed. Maybe he imagined it. But no. There it was. His own words. "I'm not sure this is serious long-term." And then, 3 dots. Typing. She replied almost immediately. "Is this about me?" Short, direct. No emojis, no cushioning. Just clarity. He stared at the screen. There are moments in life where time feels suspended, where you understand that whatever you say next will change something. He could lie, say it was taken out of context, blame autocorrect, pretend it was old, or he could tell the truth. His heart was racing, not because he didn't care, but because he suddenly realized that the possibility of losing her felt heavier than he expected. He typed, deleted, typed again, deleted again. Finally, he wrote, "Yeah, it is, but I didn't mean it the way it sounds." He hit send before he could overthink it. A few seconds passed, then more typing. She responded, "Then how did you mean it?" Fair question. Unavoidable. He could feel himself confronting something he had avoided for weeks. The uncertainty, the hesitation, the fact that he liked her, but was afraid to define it. He replied slowly, "I meant that I don't know what the future looks like yet. Not that I don't want one." It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Minutes passed, longer than before. Then her response came through. "I just wish you had told me that directly." That line hit harder than anything else, because she was right. He hadn't told her. He had told someone else, and accidentally let her find out. They talked for nearly an hour after that. Not fighting, not yelling, just clarifying. She admitted she had been unsure, too, that she didn't want to pressure him, that she was waiting for a signal. He admitted he had been afraid of promising something too soon, afraid of saying it out loud, afraid of being wrong. And maybe that was the real issue, not the screenshot, not the message, but the silence before it. By the end of the conversation, nothing dramatic had happened. They didn't break up. They didn't define everything perfectly. But something shifted. The uncertainty was no longer private. It was shared. And somehow, that made it lighter. Later, he told his friend what happened. The same friend who had received the original message. His friend responded with, "Well, at least now you have to be honest." And he realized that was true. The accidental text had forced the conversation he probably should have had weeks earlier. Looking back, he still remembers the feeling in his chest when he saw the screenshot under her name. That instant drop, that flash of regret, because it almost ended everything. One careless tap, one unfiltered sentence, one moment of doubt. But sometimes, the moments that feel catastrophic are just shortcuts. They fast-forward you to the conversation you were avoiding. And in this case, it didn't ruin the relationship. It clarified it.
Story 2. Wrong name at dinner. Meeting someone's parents always feels bigger than it looks. You tell yourself it's just dinner, just food, just conversation. But it never is. It's an evaluation, and everyone knows it. She had been dating him for 8 months, long enough to feel secure, long enough to feel comfortable, long enough to believe she wouldn't make a mistake. Until she did. The dinner was at his parents' house, small, intimate. His mother had cooked. His father was already seated when they arrived. Everything felt warm, predictable, safe. She had rehearsed in her head all afternoon. Be polite, ask questions, laugh at the right moments, make eye contact, be present, and most importantly, don't be awkward. The conversation flowed easily at first. College stories, work updates, childhood memories. His mother smiled often, his father nodded thoughtfully. It was going well. Almost too well. Then it happened. Not during a tense moment, not during a disagreement, but during something simple. His mother passed him a dish and said, "Can you hand that to her?" He reached for it. She turned slightly toward him. And without thinking, without even realizing, she said another man's name. Not loudly, not dramatically, just casually, as if it belonged there, as if it had always belonged there. Silence, immediate, heavy. The kind of silence that doesn't need volume to feel loud. His hand paused mid-air. His mother blinked. His father looked up. And she heard it. Fully, clearly, too late. There's a specific horror that comes with hearing your own mistake after it's already been released. She felt her face heat instantly. Her heartbeat sharpened. She tried to correct it, too quickly, too clumsily. Sorry, I didn't mean... But the damage was already done. Because it wasn't just the name, it was who the name belonged to. Her ex, the one she dated before him, the one he knew about, the one she had assured him was completely in the past. He recovered first. Small laugh, forced. It's okay. But it wasn't. Not really. His mother smiled politely. His father looked down at his plate. Conversation resumed. But something had shifted. Subtle, invisible, but undeniable. For the rest of dinner, she felt it. Every sentence weighed more. Every glance lasted longer. Every pause stretched. She overcompensated, asked more questions, laughed a little too enthusiastically, spoke a little too carefully. But the moment lingered, hovering just beneath the surface. When they left, the car ride was quiet, not angry, just quiet. He stared ahead at the road, hands steady on the wheel. She waited. because eventually he would say something, and he did. "Why did you say his name?" Not accusing, just direct. She didn't have a dramatic answer. No hidden feelings, no secret longing, just truth. It slipped. That was it. It slipped. Because she had dated someone else before him. Because memory sometimes lags behind intention. Because habits take time to dissolve. But none of those explanations feel comforting in the moment. He nodded slowly, still calm, but quieter than usual. "I just don't want to feel like I'm second," he said. That sentence stayed with her. Because it wasn't about jealousy. It was about placement, about significance, about whether he occupied his own space in her life or was just filling one. They talked that night. Not explosively, not dramatically, but honestly. She reassured him. He admitted the dinner had mattered more than he let on. Meeting parents had weight, names had weight, moments had weight, and sometimes one word can carry more than it should. In the weeks that followed, nothing dramatic happened. They didn't break up. They didn't argue constantly. But there was a period of quiet recalibration. He needed reassurance. She needed to prove presence. And slowly, intentionally, they rebuilt confidence in something that had briefly cracked. Years later, they would laugh about it. Mostly. But even then, she could still remember the feeling. That half second, that silence, that awareness. Because it almost ended everything. Not because of betrayal, not because of lingering feelings, but because sometimes the past lingers in language longer than we expect.
The restaurant bill. By the third date, most people start relaxing. The early nerves fade. Conversation becomes easier. You stop wondering whether the other person likes you, and start wondering where things might go. For her, the third date felt promising. The first had been coffee. The second had been a long walk through a park. This one was dinner. A real restaurant. Low lighting, quiet music. The kind of place people choose when they're trying to make a good impression. He had picked it. She arrived first. He walked in a few minutes later smiling, apologizing for traffic. The kind of small apology that makes someone seem considerate. They hugged, sat down, and the evening began. At first, everything felt natural. They talked about work, childhood stories, travel. He told a funny story about a disastrous camping trip. She laughed more than she expected. There was no awkward silence, no forced conversation. Just the steady rhythm of two people getting to know each other. The waiter arrived. He ordered first a cocktail, then an appetizer for the table, then his meal. When the waiter looked at her, she ordered something simple, water, and a pasta dish. Nothing extravagant, just dinner. As the night continued, he ordered another drink, then suggested dessert. She hesitated for a moment, but agreed. It was the third date after all, and everything still felt good. The dessert arrived, chocolate cake. They shared it, talked about movies, talked about music. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and said, "This place is great." She nodded. It was. Eventually, the plates were cleared. The waiter returned and gently placed the bill on the table. That quiet moment where dinner shifts into something else. The moment where someone usually reaches for the check, or offers, or at least acknowledges it. He looked down at the bill, then looked up at the waiter, and said casually, "Can we split it?" The waiter nodded. "Of course," and walked away. She didn't think much of it. Splitting a bill isn't unusual, especially on early dates. She wasn't expecting him to pay for everything. That wasn't the issue. A few minutes later, the waiter returned. 2 small receipts, one placed in front of each of them. She glanced down and paused. The number didn't make sense. Her total was far higher than the cost of what she ordered. She mentally reviewed the night: water, pasta, half of the dessert. That should have been it. But the bill said something different. Her receipt included half of the appetizers, half of the drinks, half of the dessert, half of everything. She looked up. He was staring at his phone, scrolling slowly, not looking at her, not looking at the bill, just scrolling. She did the math quickly. He had ordered 2 cocktails, an appetizer, a steak, and dessert. Her meal had been simple, but the bill was evenly divided, 50-50. For a moment, she wondered if it had been a mistake. Maybe the waiter assumed. Maybe this was just how they did it here. But when she looked at him again, he still wasn't looking up. And that's when she understood. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional. She could have said something. She could have pointed it out, asked the waiter to adjust it, mentioned what she actually ordered. It would have been reasonable, fair, normal. But something about the moment stopped her. Not the money. It wasn't about the money. It was the silence. The way he avoided eye contact. The way he never acknowledged the bill. As if the entire situation was something he hoped would pass unnoticed. She picked up her card, placed it on the tray, signed the receipt, and said nothing. Outside the restaurant, the night air felt cooler. He smiled again, just like he had when he arrived. "That was really nice," he said. She nodded politely. It was. They stood there for a moment, the kind of moment where people usually talk about seeing each other again. But neither of them said it. Eventually, he said, "Text me when you get home." She nodded again, then walked toward her car. Later that night, she replayed the evening in her mind. Not the conversation, not the dessert, not the laughter, just that moment. The bill, the silence, the quiet understanding that something had been revealed. It wasn't about generosity, or expectations, or traditional dating rules. It was about something smaller, something harder to explain. Awareness, consideration, the way people behave when they think no one is paying attention. He did text her the next day. A simple message. "Had a great time last night." She read it, looked at the screen for a moment, then put her phone down. Some moments in a relationship don't end things dramatically. No argument, no confrontation, just a quiet realization. Sometimes a relationship ends with a bill.
The phone face down. At first, it didn't seem like anything, just a small habit. One of those things people do without realizing it. Every time they sat down together, she placed her phone on the table, face down. The first few times, he barely noticed. People put their phones down all the time, sometimes screen up, sometimes screen down. It didn't mean anything. But habits become visible when they repeat, and this one repeated every single time: dinner, coffee, movie nights, whenever they were sitting across from each other. The phone appeared, face down. They had been dating for about 6 months, long enough to know each other's routines, long enough to stop pretending to be perfect, long enough to relax, and that's usually when people start noticing the small details. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Maybe she just didn't want distractions. Maybe she was trying to be present. If anything, that seemed thoughtful. But then other things started standing out. Her notifications were always silent, no vibration, no sound, just the occasional brief glow through the edges of the phone. And whenever that happened, she flipped the screen slightly away. Not dramatically, just enough. One evening they were at a small restaurant, the kind with dim lights and quiet music. They had ordered drinks. The conversation was easy, light, comfortable, and like always. Her phone sat between them, face down, Halfway through the conversation, a faint glow appeared beneath the phone. A notification. He saw it, she saw it too. And without even looking at the screen, she casually slid the phone into her bag. The motion was smooth, practiced, almost automatic. Something about that moment stayed with him. Not because of what happened, but because of how natural it looked, like she had done it many times before. Later that night, they were back at his apartment, watching something on television. Her phone rested on the coffee table, face down again. After a while, he asked a simple question, not confrontational, not suspicious, just curious. "Why do you always put your phone face down?" She looked over at him, smiled slightly. "Oh, I don't know," she said. "Habit, I guess." Then she flipped the phone over. Screen up. For the first time all evening. For a moment, he felt silly. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe he had just noticed a random pattern and built a story around it. That happens sometimes. The mind fills in blanks, but then her phone lit up again. A message, just for a second. Before the screen dimmed, she reached over, turned the phone back, face down, and continued watching the show. That was the moment something shifted. Not a dramatic realization, not a sudden accusation, just a quiet feeling. Something felt off. He didn't say anything. Not that night. Not the next day. But once you notice something like that, it becomes impossible to stop noticing. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Restaurants, coffee shops, his apartment, her apartment. Every time they sat down together, the phone appeared, face down. Eventually, he stopped wondering why she did it and started wondering why it bothered him so much. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was privacy. Maybe everyone deserves a little space. Or maybe it was the feeling that part of her life existed just out of view. One evening while they were cooking dinner together, her phone buzzed softly on the counter. She glanced at it quickly, then turned it face down again. He watched the motion, the same familiar movement, the same quiet habit. And he realized something. It wasn't about the phone, it was about trust. Not trust that she was hiding something, but trust that if something mattered, she wouldn't feel the need to hide it. Later that night, he asked again, more directly this time. "Is there a reason you keep your phone face down?" She looked at him for a moment, longer this time, then said quietly, "I guess I just like my privacy." He nodded. That was a fair answer. Reasonable, normal. But even reasonable answers don't always quiet a feeling. Sometimes a relationship doesn't change because of a dramatic moment. Sometimes it shifts because of a small habit, a repeated action, a tiny signal that something might be slightly out of alignment. The phone, face down, every time. It might have meant nothing, or it might have meant everything.
The truck. Road trips have a way of making people want to prove things. You're in a car for hours. No distractions, no easy exits. Just conversation, silence, and whatever version of yourself you decide to present. And sometimes you try a little too hard. He was 22 at the time, out of college, new job, first year living on his own. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like his life was starting to move forward. The road trip wasn't supposed to mean anything, just a weekend drive with friends. 4 people, 2 cars, a few hours out of the city. Nothing dramatic, except one of the people going was a guy he had recently started seeing, not officially dating, not exactly casual either. That strange in-between stage where every interaction feels like it matters more than it should. He wanted to look confident, capable, relaxed, the kind of guy who could handle anything. They'd stopped at a gas station about an hour into the trip, one of those big roadside places with too many snack options and a parking lot full of people stretching their legs. Everyone got out of the car. Someone went inside for drinks. Someone else went to the restroom. He stayed outside, leaning against the car, trying to look like he belonged there, trying to look like the kind of guy who was comfortable anywhere. That's when he saw the truck, parked a few spaces over, big, old, the kind of truck that looked like it had never needed help from anyone. And next to it, a guy trying to push it, alone. The engine must have died. The truck wasn't moving. The guy looked tired, frustrated, sweating in the afternoon heat. Without thinking too much about it, he walked over. "Need a hand?" he asked. The guy nodded. "Yeah, just trying to roll it forward so I can jump it." It seemed simple enough. Push the truck, help out, look useful, look strong, look like the kind of person who didn't hesitate when something needed to be done. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw his friends watching from near the car, including him, the guy he wanted to impress. That was enough. Now he really wanted to make this look easy. They both got behind the truck, hands on the tailgate. 1, 2, push. The truck didn't move, not even a little. He pushed harder, feet digging into the pavement, arms locked, trying to look like the weight didn't bother him, trying to pretend this was completely normal. "Little more," the driver said. They pushed again. This time the truck shifted slightly, just enough to feel progress. He smiled. Good. That was good. That looked good. They pushed again, harder, and that's when it happened. His foot slipped. Not dramatically, not like in a movie. Just enough. Enough for his balance to go forward. Enough for his hands to lose grip. Enough for his shoulder to bump the tailgate at exactly the wrong angle. The truck rolled. Just a little. But he didn't. He went forward. Hands out, trying to catch himself, missing, and landing directly on the pavement in front of the truck. For a second, nobody said anything. The driver froze. His friends froze. He stayed there, half on the ground, half on one knee, staring at the asphalt, trying to decide how much dignity he had left. "You good?" the driver asked. He nodded quickly. Yeah, I'm good." He stood up, brushed off his hands, tried to laugh like it hadn't hurt, tried to act like falling face first in a gas station parking lot was just part of the plan. They got the truck moving after that. Slowly, carefully. He didn't try to push as hard this time, didn't try to prove anything, just helped, quietly. When he walked back to the car, his friends were smiling, not laughing, not making fun of him. Just that look people get when they've seen something they know you'll remember forever. The guy he had been trying to impress opened the passenger door, waited until he sat down, then said, "You didn't have to do that, you know." He shrugged. "I know." A pause. Then the guy smiled slightly. But it was kind of impressive anyway. That wasn't the reaction he expected. Not teasing, not judgment. Just honest. And strangely, warm. For the rest of the trip, no one mentioned the fall again. They talked, listened to music, argued about directions, normal road trip things. But something felt different. Lighter. Less like he had to perform, more like he could just exist. Later that night, after they checked into the hotel, the same guy handed him a soda from the vending machine. "You always try that hard?" he asked. He laughed. "Only when I think someone's watching." The guy nodded. Good to know. Looking back, he still remembers the sound his hands made when they hit the pavement. The quick flash of embarrassment. The instant regret. Because for a second he thought he had ruined everything. Trying too hard. Trying to look stronger than he was. Trying to be someone else. But sometimes the moment you think makes you look ridiculous is the moment someone realizes you're real. What would you have done? Would you have helped push the truck? Or stayed by the car and played it safe?
The bowling alley, middle school hangouts always feel bigger than they really are. At the time, everything feels important. Who you sit next to, who laughs at your jokes, who notices what you say, and especially, who you can impress. He was 14, old enough to think he understood how things worked, young enough to have no idea. It was a Friday night. A group of them had gone to the bowling alley. Not a party, not a date. Just one of those group things where everyone shows up and hopes something interesting happens. There were about 8 of them, 2 lanes, shoes that never fit right, that smell every bowling alley has no matter where you go. Pizza boxes on the table, plastic cups filled with soda. Everything felt normal, comfortable, safe, until he realized she was there. They had the same math class, sat 2 rows apart, had talked a few times, nothing serious, but enough that he noticed when she walked into the room. Enough that he suddenly cared how he looked, how he stood, how he threw the ball. At first he tried to act like it didn't matter. Just bowl normally, laugh with everyone else, pretend he wasn't paying attention to where she was sitting, pretend he didn't notice when she watched him. Then one of his friends said, "All right, next one's yours." He stood up, grabbed the ball, and suddenly the lane felt longer than it had before, like everyone was watching, even if they weren't. He picked up a heavier ball than usual. Not because he needed it, because it looked better, because heavier meant stronger, because stronger meant cooler, at least in his head. He stepped up to the line, took a breath, rolled his shoulders like he had seen older guys do. Behind him, someone said, "Don't mess this up." Everyone laughed. He laughed too. But now he really didn't want to mess it up. He started his approach, 1 step, 2 steps, swing, release. The ball went straight into the lane, fast, too fast. It hit the side hard, bounced slightly, then rolled forward in a slow, crooked line, barely touching any pins. 3 fell. The rest stayed standing. Groans behind him. Someone clapped sarcastically. He smiled, shrugged, tried to act like he didn't care, but he did, more than he wanted to admit. He turned around to sit down. And that's when it happened. His shoe caught the edge of the floor right where the lane started. Bowling shoes never grip the way you expect. 1 step felt normal, the next didn't. His foot slid forward. His balance went with it. And before he could stop himself, he went down. Hard. Right at the edge of the lane. 1 hand hit the floor. 1 knee slammed into the wood. The ball rack rattled behind him. For a second, nobody moved. Not because it was serious, because it was unexpected. Then someone laughed. Not in a mean way. Just surprised. The kind of laugh that escapes before you think about it. Another person laughed too. Then another. Soon everyone was laughing. Even the people in the next lane looked over. He stayed on the floor for a second, not hurt, just frozen, trying to decide how to stand up without making it worse. "You good?" his friend asked. He nodded quickly. "Yeah." He stood up, brushed off his pants, tried to smile, tried to look like falling in front of everyone was completely normal. He sat down at the table, picked up his soda, took a sip, pretended to watch the game, pretended nothing had happened. But his face felt hot. His ears felt hot. That feeling you get when you know everyone saw, even if nobody says anything. A minute later, she walked over. Holding a bowling ball, she sat down next to him. Not across, not at the other end, right next to him. "You almost took the whole lane out," she said. He laughed, a real laugh this time. "Yeah, that was the plan." She smiled. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, just my pride." She laughed at that. Not loud, not teasing, just enough. And somehow that made it better. For the rest of the night, no one really talked about the fall. They joked about bad scores, argued about turns, ordered more fries, normal stuff. But every time he got up to bowl after that, he didn't grab the heavy ball anymore, didn't try to look cool. Just played. Later, when everyone was leaving, she said goodbye at the door. Next time, she said, maybe don't try so hard. He smiled. Next time I'm using the light ball. She nodded. Good idea. Looking back, he barely remembers the score. Doesn't remember who won, doesn't remember what anyone else bowled, but he remembers the sound his shoe made when it slid, the moment he realized he was falling, the second he thought he had completely embarrassed himself. Because at 14, moments like that feel permanent, like everyone will remember forever. Most of the time, they don't. Sometimes the only thing people remember is that you laughed too. What would you have done? Would you have grabbed the heavy ball or played it safe from the start?
The first day. The first day of school always feels bigger than it really is. The night before, everything seems important. What you wear, where you sit, who you talk to, who notices you, and who doesn't. She was 13, old enough to care what people thought, young enough to think everyone was watching. It was the first day at a new school, new building, new classmates, new teachers, new everything. She didn't know anyone there. Not really. One girl from her old school had also transferred, but they weren't close. Just familiar enough to make the situation feel slightly less terrifying. She woke up earlier than she needed to, checked the time, checked it again, then lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what kind of person she wanted to be that day. Confident, quiet, funny, invisible. She didn't know yet, so she got up and started getting ready. Picking clothes took longer than it should have. Everything felt wrong. Too casual, too dressed up, too childish, too obvious. She changed 3 times before finally deciding on something simple, something safe, something that wouldn't stand out. At least that was the plan. When she got to school, the hallways were already loud, lockers slamming, people laughing, groups forming instantly like they had known each other forever. She walked slower than everyone else, not on purpose, just because she didn't know where she was going or where she was supposed to belong. Her first class was English, room 214, second floor. She checked the paper in her hand at least 4 times on the way there, just to be sure. When she walked in, most of the seats were already taken. That moment every new student dreads. Walking into a room where everyone else already has a place. She scanned the room quickly, looking for an empty desk, trying not to make eye contact with anyone, trying not to look lost. There was one seat open near the middle of the room. Not front, not back, middle. Safe enough. She walked over and sat down, put her bag on the floor, looked straight ahead, pretended she had always been there. A girl sitting next to her leaned over slightly. "Are you new?" she asked. Her voice wasn't mean, just curious. She nodded. "Yeah?" The girl smiled. "I thought so. I've never seen you before." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just smiled back, small, careful, the kind of smile you give when you're not sure what comes next. Class started. The teacher talked. People introduced themselves, said where they were from, said what they liked. When it was her turn, she stood up, heart beating faster than it should. "My name is—" Her voice sounded quieter than she expected. She cleared her throat. Started again. "My name is—" This time it came out right. She said where she moved from, said how long she had lived there, said she liked art, then sat down quickly, hoping that was enough, hoping nobody noticed her hands shaking. For the rest of the class, she focused on the desk, on the notebook, on anything that wasn't the feeling of being the only person in the room who didn't belong yet. Between classes, the hallways were worse. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. Everyone seemed to know someone. She walked with her schedule in her hand, trying to look like she was supposed to be there, trying not to look like she was counting the minutes. At lunch, she almost went to the bathroom just to avoid the cafeteria, but she didn't. She told herself she wouldn't. She walked in, tray in her hands, heart beating again. That same feeling. Where do I sit? There were tables everywhere, groups everywhere, no obvious place, no obvious invitation. She stood there for a second too long, long enough to feel it. That moment when you think everyone can tell you don't know where to go. Then she heard a voice. "Hey!" She looked up. It was the girl from English, the one who had asked if she was new. "You can sit here if you want," she said. Just like that. No big deal, no long conversation. Just a small space opened at the table. She sat down, carefully, trying not to look too relieved, trying not to look like that one sentence had just saved her entire day. They talked a little. Not much, just names, classes, teachers, normal things. But it was enough. Enough to make the room feel less loud. Enough to make the day feel possible. When she got home that afternoon, her mom asked the question everyone asks. "How was your first day?" She shrugged. It was okay. That was all she said. Because she didn't know how to explain how something small could feel so big. How one empty seat, one question, one invitation to sit down could change the whole day. Years later, she barely remembered the classes, didn't remember the homework, didn't remember the locker number. But she remembered that moment standing in the cafeteria, tray in her hands, nowhere to go, and one person saying, "You can sit here." Sometimes the first day isn't about being confident. It's about finding the one moment that makes you feel like you might be okay. What was your first day like? Did it go the way you expected, or not at all?
The babysitter. Some memories don't feel embarrassing until years later. At the time, they seem important, serious, like the biggest moment in the world. Then you grow up and realize you were just a kid trying too hard. He was 12, old enough to think he understood things, young enough to understand nothing at all. His parents had hired a babysitter for the summer, not because he needed one, at least not the way little kids do, but because both of them worked late, and they didn't want him home alone every day. He didn't like the idea at first. 12 felt too old for a babysitter, too old to be watched, too old to be told what to do. That was before he met her. She was 16, maybe 17. He never knew exactly. Old enough to drive, old enough to seem like a real adult, but still young enough to feel completely different from anyone he knew at school. The first time she showed up, he tried to act like he didn't care. Sat on the couch, didn't say much, just nodded when she talked. Pretended he had better things to think about. Inside, though, he noticed everything. Her shoes, her voice, the way she laughed at something his mom said. He didn't know what the feeling was, only that suddenly he wanted her to think he was cool. The problem was he had no idea how to do that. At 12, being cool means guessing, and guessing wrong most of the time. One afternoon, she came over like usual. His parents left. The house got quiet. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone. He stood there for a minute, trying to decide what to do. He could go to his room, play video games, ignore her. That would be normal, but normal didn't feel right that day. He wanted to do something impressive, something that would make her notice him, something that would make him seem older, stronger, more interesting. He just didn't know what. Then he saw the toolbox. It was sitting in the corner of the garage. His dad had been fixing something earlier. The lid was open, tools everywhere, and suddenly he had an idea. Not a good one. But at 12, it felt perfect. He walked back into the kitchen trying to sound casual. Hey, he said, do you know how to fix stuff? She looked up. Fix stuff? Yeah, like tools and things. She shrugged. A little, I guess. He nodded. Like this confirmed something important. I fix stuff all the time. He didn't, not even a little, but it sounded right when he said it. She smiled slightly. Oh, yeah? He nodded again, trying to look confident. Yeah, my dad lets me use his tools. That part was technically true. He had used a screwdriver once. That counted. He went back to the garage, picked up a wrench, held it for a second, realizing he had no plan. Nothing actually needed fixing. So he looked around until he found something loose. A small metal bracket on the side of a shelf. Perfect. He grabbed it, turned the wrench. Nothing happened. He turned harder. Still nothing. Now he was committed. He kept turning, trying to look like he knew what he was doing, trying to imagine what his dad would do, trying not to think about the fact that he had no idea what the wrench even fit. Then the wrench slipped. His hand hit the shelf. Hard. The bracket came loose all at once. The shelf tilted. A box fell. Then another. Then 3 more. Loud. Way louder than he expected. From the kitchen, she called out, "You okay?" He froze. Looked at the mess. Tools on the floor. Boxes everywhere. Shelf crooked. Hand stinging. Pride completely gone. Yeah, he said, too quickly. I got it. She walked into the garage anyway. Looked at the shelf. Looked at the tools. Looked at him. Trying to hold a wrench like he had been doing this his whole life. She raised one eyebrow. You fixing something? He nodded slowly. Yeah. Paused, then she laughed. Not mean, not loud, just surprised. You sure it wasn't already fine? He felt his face get hot. Yeah, I just wanted to check it. She shook her head, smiling. Well, mechanic, you might want to put it back before your dad sees it. They spent the next 10 minutes putting everything back together, or at least trying to. He handed her screws. She held the shelf steady. At one point, she said, You don't have to try so hard, you know. He looked at her. What? She shrugged. You're already funny. That's enough. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, like he understood. Even though he didn't. Years later, he still remembers that afternoon. Not the shelf, not the tools, not even the bruise on his hand. He remembers the feeling of wanting to seem older than he was, wanting to be impressive, wanting to be taken seriously, and completely missing the point. Because sometimes the moment you try hardest to look cool is the moment everyone can tell you're still just a kid. Do you remember a moment like that? A time you tried to impress someone and it went completely wrong?
The group project. Projects always sound easier than they are. The teacher says, work together like that solves everything. But most of the time, it just means you end up caring too much or not enough. And sometimes it means you try to look smarter than you really are. Zach was 15, sophomore year. Old enough to want people to notice him. Young enough to think confidence meant never admitting you were confused. The assignment was simple. At least it sounded simple. History class, group presentation, pick a topic, research it, present it to the class. Easy, until he saw who was in his group. There were 4 of them. 2 guys he barely talked to, 1 girl he didn't know at all, and 1 girl he definitely knew. Sarah sat across the room, always answered questions, always seemed calm, the kind of person who never looked nervous. Zach had never talked to her before, but now they were in the same group, and suddenly the project felt more important than it should have. They met after school in the library, sat around one of the big tables, papers everywhere, laptops open. Nobody really knew where to start. The other 2 guys didn't seem interested. One of them said, I'll just do whatever you guys want. The other nodded. Same, said the other girl, So now it was just the two of them, Zach and Sarah, looking at each other, waiting for someone to take control. He didn't know the topic, didn't understand the assignment yet, didn't even read the instructions fully, but he didn't want to look lost, not in front of her. So he said the first thing that came to mind. I can handle the presentation. The words came out too fast, too confident, too certain. Sarah looked surprised. You sure? She asked. He nodded immediately. Yeah, I'm good at that stuff. He wasn't, not even a little. But now it was said. And once you say something like that, you can't take it back. The rest of the week, they worked on the project during class. Sarah did most of the research. The other members copied notes. Zach focused on the slides. Or at least he pretended to. Mostly, he tried to make everything look organized. Titles, bullet points, pictures, things that made it seem like he knew what he was doing. He told himself he would figure out the details later. He always figured things out later. Except this time. Later came faster than he expected. Presentation day. He walked into class with that nervous feeling in his stomach that he didn't want to admit was there. Everyone else looked normal. Talking, laughing, complaining about homework. Like this was just another day. For him, it felt different. Like the room was watching already, even before they started. Their group went third. 2 groups went before them. Both did fine. Not perfect, but fine. Now it was their turn. The teacher called their names. They stood up, walked to the front. He could feel his heart beating harder with every step. He opened the slides, turned to face the class, took a breath, and started talking. At first, it felt okay. He read the title, introduced the topic, said the first few lines exactly the way he practiced in his head. Then he got to the next slide, and something felt wrong. The words didn't match what he thought they meant. He kept going anyway, talking faster, trying to sound confident, trying to make it make sense. Halfway through the presentation, he realized the problem. Zach hadn't misunderstood one small part. He had misunderstood the whole project. The topic wasn't what he thought it was. The dates didn't match. The explanation didn't fit. He was talking, but the words didn't line up with the slides anymore. He glanced at her, just for a second. She was looking at the screen, then at him. Not angry, not laughing, just confused. That made it worse. He kept talking. Because stopping would be worse. Because admitting it would be worse. Because standing there in silence would feel worse than anything. So he finished, said the last sentence, clicked the final slide, and stood there waiting for the teacher to say something. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. The teacher looked at the screen, then at him, then at the paper in her hand. She smiled politely. Okay, she said. I think we may have mixed up part of the assignment here. A few people laughed. Not loud, not mean, just surprised. He felt his face get hot instantly, his ears, his neck, that feeling you get when you know everyone heard it. They went back to their seats. He didn't say anything, didn't look at anyone, just sat down and stared at the desk. After a few seconds, Sarah leaned over slightly. You didn't have to do the whole thing yourself, she said. Her voice wasn't angry, just honest. Zach nodded. I know. Pause. Then she smiled a little. It wasn't that bad. He laughed quietly. Yeah, it was. Looking back, he doesn't remember the grade, doesn't remember the topic, doesn't remember the slides. He remembers the moment he realized he didn't know what he was talking about, and kept talking anyway, because sometimes trying to look confident makes things worse. And sometimes the smartest thing you can say is, "I'm not sure."
The wedding table. Weddings are strange when you don't know anyone. Everyone else seems connected. Family, friends, old stories, inside jokes. And you're just there, trying to act like you belong. As Daniel almost didn't go. The invitation had come from a college friend he hadn't seen in years. They weren't close anymore. Not really, but close enough that saying no felt wrong. So he said yes, bought a shirt he didn't need, drove 3 hours, and told himself it would be fine. And the ceremony was easy. Sit down, stand up, smile when everyone else smiled, clap when everyone else clapped. He could do that. The problem started at the reception, because that's when you have to talk. When he found his name card, he realized he didn't recognize anyone at the table. 8 chairs, 7 strangers, 1 empty seat with his name on it. He sat down slowly, put his phone on the table, looked around. Everyone else already seemed comfortable, talking, laughing, like they had known each other for years. A woman across from him smiled. "I don't think we've met. I'm Maya." He nodded. "Daniel," she pointed to the man next to her. "This is Chris. We went to school with the bride." Chris waved slightly. "Hey." Daniel nodded again. Trying to look relaxed, trying to look like this happened all the time. It didn't. At first, the conversation was normal. Where are you from? How do you know them? How long was the drive? Safe questions, safe answers. The kind of talk that fills space without meaning much. Daniel felt himself relaxing. This wasn't so bad. Just people. Just talking. Nothing to worry about. Dinner was served, drinks came, music got louder. People started telling stories about the bride and groom. Funny ones, embarrassing ones. Everyone laughed, even the older man at the end of the table. Mr. Lawson, someone said his name was. He had that quiet smile like he had heard every story already. Daniel wanted to join in, not just sit there, not just nod. He wanted to be part of the table, part of the conversation. So when there was a pause, he spoke. You can always tell how long people have known each other by how embarrassing the stories get. A few people laughed. Good. That felt good. He kept going. When I get married, I'm not inviting anyone who knew me before 20. More laughter. Even better. Now he felt comfortable. Too comfortable. Chris raised his glass. To bad decisions before adulthood. Everyone laughed again. Daniel smiled and said the first thing that came to his mind. Yeah, that's why I don't trust anyone who says they were a good kid. He laughed a little, waiting for the table to laugh too. Most of them did, except one. Mr. Lawson. He didn't laugh. He just looked at Daniel, still smiling, but not the same smile as before. Maya leaned closer to Daniel slightly, quietly. He was the principal at their high school, she whispered. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Not a big reaction, not dramatic, just that quick feeling when your brain realizes you said the wrong thing, at the wrong time, to the wrong person. He nodded slowly, like that explained everything. Because it did. Of course the embarrassing stories, of course the jokes, of course the look on Mr. Lawson's face. Daniel picked up his glass, took a sip, trying to act normal, trying to pretend nothing had happened. Mr. Lawson leaned forward slightly. Still calm, still polite. I hope they weren't all bad kids, he said. Not angry, not joking, just steady. Daniel shook his head quickly. No, I didn't mean it like that. Mr. Lawson smiled again. I know. But the conversation didn't feel the same after that. Not tense, not awkward enough to leave, just quieter, more careful, like everyone was choosing their words now. For the rest of dinner, Daniel talked less, listened more, nodded at the right times, laughed when everyone else laughed. But that easy feeling from before was gone, all because of one sentence, one joke, one moment where he wanted to sound funnier than he needed to. And later that night, when he was walking back to his car, he replayed it in his head. The joke, the look, the whisper from Maya, the realization. It wasn't a disaster. Nobody yelled, nobody got mad, nothing dramatic happened. But it stayed with him anyway, because moments like that always do. Sometimes the worst embarrassment isn't loud. It's quiet. It's realizing you tried too hard to fit in and said something you didn't need to say at all.
What would you have done? If you'd like to hear more documented accounts like this, you're welcome to subscribe. New stories are added each week.